So you have been tasked with customs classification. You're in charge of determining the commodity code for your products. And you wonder where to start. Now, probably you've done some digging online. If you looked at some blogs and you have researched, there are a lot of free resources available, but you just can't seem to pin it down. One day says this, the other one says this, and besides, the rules look feverishly complicated. So you think you've got the code, but is it really the right one? If only there was a systematic approach, which customs classification experts, professionals, those that classify all the time, they would recommend. If there was some kind of approach, that would help, wouldn't it? If you knew you took this approach for all of your classifications. Well, look, in this course, we're going to tackle exactly this. Hey, this is a under 30 minutes bite-sized training, a little course if you want, about customs classification. And we have a particular focus today, and that is the customs classification questionnaire. What questions do we need to answer in order to be able to classify a product in the first place? It's quite simple, right? A series of questions that will help us get to grips with customs commodity codes. How are we going to do this? Well, we've got a document that you can download right now, and you can use that as your template in order to follow a logical step-by-step structure that will help you to find the commodity code, regardless of jurisdiction, regardless of type of product. It works every time. This document also provides you with a record, because if you fill it out every time you classify a product, if that's what you still do and you don't leave it all to a glorified AI. So if you still do this manually, or at least you want some kind of justification for what it is that we're classifying, you can use that document as a baseline to justify your classification decisions. And that is very helpful, particularly for those products that are a bit controversial, where it could go either way, or where in discussions, you may find yourself at odds with your colleagues. But don't you worry, I have also put all of that onto some slides, and that means we get to discuss it together. So the document itself is great, but the discussion around it, why we are putting on this document, what we're putting on it, is also useful. So I recommend you watch this video first. That'll walk you through the document and explain what kind of the questions are. And then you get to play with the document and even incorporate it, hopefully, fingers crossed, if we did a good job, into your own process and procedures. It's just another way to stay compliant. So let me show you what we're going to cover in this course. So I'm just over here on the top corner. So here is the course that we've designed for you at this time. It's called Customs Classification Questionnaire, because the focus of it is this questionnaire. Again, we want to stay under 30 minutes, right? So it's one of the elements that we need to help you find that commodity code, right? So here's what this course is all about. So in this course, it's an introductory course. It is more of a practical tool that can assist you on your quest to find the correct customs classification code, as I said, for any product and for any purpose. We will go over the key concept of customs classification at high level, of course. That's just to set the scene and explain to you what this actually is. So you walk away with a good understanding of what customs classification is at high level. We'll also then look at the leading industry methodology that I and others use, customs classification experts, certified specialists use in order to determine the commodity codes for any items that you want to import or export. The key feature, as I said, of this course is to talk you through a straightforward customs classification questionnaire that you can, as I said, download right away. It comes with this course. And you will also have this explanation video to talk you through how to do it, plus the slides and all of that. Yeah, so it's a real classification bundle. Now, this will also serve you, as I said, as a record. If you want to recall how did you manage to classify this product 15 days ago or 6 months ago, there'll be a written record if you use this template and why you have reached this conclusion. So should be interesting. In terms of table of content, we'll get there in a moment. One thing to stress though, I want to make sure that you are fully aware of what we're not going to do in this course. We're not going to go into all of the details of customs classification. There is so much more to say. And for this, you need a longer time than we have available, right? So book yourself on a customs classification training course. They are also on offer on our website. And that will give us the time and the breadth and the face-to-face in order to talk this through in more detail. So don't expect a full customs classification discussion of every aspect. Secondly, we'll not discuss the GIRs. So if you're interested in GIRs or GRIs, whatever you want to call them, as well as the structure of the HS, this is not the place you want to be going. We will also not discuss specific customs tariffs. So UK, EU, US, Australian tariffs, no. We are focused on your practical approaches to how do you go about classifying a product? What are the kind of initial steps even beyond this entire methodology of HS codes, structure of tariffs, etc., right? We want to start at the beginning, and that is a good understanding of what the product is that we're dealing with, yeah? So any of these matters, as important as they are, they come next, right? Step by step. So the first step, look at the product in more detail and understand how we should record it. Then we apply the rules to it, and that we can do in different trainings. So we'll also not classify individual products. And don't forget, any details, please check out our website where you can book live trainings with me. And that will tell you then, and you know, that will tell you the methodology and all these details I've just mentioned here on this slide. What we do cover though is this. We're going to look at some definitions that you need to know. These are fundamental for everyone, regardless of where you are, whether you've started classifying products for the first time or whether you're a seasoned pro. We need to summarize to set the scene as to what actually is HS classification. So we're going to do that, but in a nutshell. We are going to take a look at what the customs authorities say about HS code compliance. Now, there are so many ideas about how you're going to get that code. Some people say, oh, I'm just going to take the code that the supplier gave me. Others say, well, the freight forwarder did it. You need to listen to what the customs authorities say about HS code compliance before you can make a good judgment as to what codes from whom you should accept. So we're going to cover that. Then it's time to present yourself the customs questionnaire, customs classification questionnaire, the key questions you want to ask every time for every product around the world. We also need to look at some special cases where this questionnaire alone is not enough and you need to add more information. And I'll draw some conclusions and tell you what some next steps could be. That is the program. Sounds intense? Don't worry, I've got you covered. All right, so if you're ready to go, I am certainly ready to talk you through everything right now. Let's go. So the first thing we want to talk about is the definitions we need to know about. So the HS harmonized system is the first thing we talk about. So the harmonized system is an international sequence of numbers. It is also, if we say broadly, the universal economic language and code for goods, is an indispensable tool for international trade. So when we talk about HS code, it is the numerical translation of a product. And we've designed this at international level. So it applies in over 200 countries around the world, from Argentina to China, from Canada to New Zealand. The harmonized system consists of 6 globally accepted numbers that have a special methodology of putting them together, sequence of putting them together. And these 6 numbers are the same across the world. Well, so they should be. You can imagine it's kind of like a book. You open the book and you can see details of, in the table of contents of chapters, headings, and so on and so on. So the more granular detail you want, first you start with a chapter, you get the high-level overview of what that chapter is all about, and then you dig deeper into headings and so on and so on. So the same structure applies here. We have a chapter, and then we have a heading, and the chapter and the heading together make up the codes that you want. And that can be subheadings, etc., etc. So the first 6 digits of this tariff are harmonized globally, and then national endings get added to it. So national endings could mean the UK adds numbering, the US adds numbers. So they go in 2 tranches of 2. So they go 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 for exports, usually creating an 8-digit code, and for imports, usually creating a 10-digit code. All of that is written down in a book. That book's called the tariff, and it's the rule book, and it is the book that tells you all of the codes. And this doesn't only tell you the codes, but also tells you the tariff rates, so the duty rates, the import duty rates, usually in percentages associated with it. So that then exposes you to the commodity code, right? So you've started with the HS code, and then that was a 6-digit code. You know that stands for harmonized system. All of these codes are in a book called the tariff. And when we add more digits to it, 8, 10, we can call it, in most generic terms, the commodity code. Now, what is actually the act of customs classification? So the act that we're discussing here today is describing the goods precisely as they are in front of you by assigning them a code. And that's usually up to 10 digits. And it is the WCO, the World Customs Organization, that maintains a general classifications for all goods into classes around these 6 digits. And then it's national tariffs and so on. There are over 10,000 codes, and at times it is really difficult to determine what the actual code is, especially since the wording used is legalese. It's lawyer talk. Difficult. And on top of that, we know how important these HS codes are because trade agreements and rules and regulations use these codes not only for duty determination processes, but also to alleviate duty, to cut duty, to bring it down to 0. So it's really important we get the right code because then we know what duty we need to pay and what rules and regulations to follow. Now, just a quick word. There are so many words that we can use for classification. We can talk about commodity code. We can talk about HS code, combined nomenclature in the EU, classification code, tariff number, customs classification number, CN number, harmonized code, HTS number. We all mean essentially the same. A commodity code, a customs code, customs classification code, that thing with 6, 8, 10 digits. So as I said, there are different rule books according to the places you look at. So for the UK, for example, you'd use the UK trade tariff. Then for the EU, you have the common customs tariff, but then they take all of that and put that into a database, an online database that they call TARIC, and that lists rules, regulations, everything you need to know, all based on that HS code. And the US uses the HTS system, etc., etc. So as I've said, once you've got the code, you've got it all. So how easy is it then to find the code, or how do you get to the finished code? Well, one approach would be to say, do you know what? Let's ask the supplier. The exporter will have had a code, so I can use that for import. Or someone else in the supply chain must have a code. So what you do is you go and ask them. That's a bit tricky because do you know that they know? And also, they might be thinking about their tariff. So if you ask an American for an UK HTS code or HS code, then they might probably answer you according to their legislation, not yours. So you got to be a bit careful, because what they say might be right, but it also might not. Who's to say that they know how to classify products? So asking someone else without knowing that they're an expert is a bit tricky, can be a bit tricky. Relying on a freight forwarder, so basically saying, hey, I'm importing this, just find me the code, get it in. I don't know how, I don't know how you care. It's also tricky, because the freight forwarder, the customs agent, we, for example, offer customs filing services, right? We wouldn't need to guide you on what the right code is. We wouldn't spend any time thinking about freight forwarders or agents wouldn't think about if the code is right. We assume the code is right, and it is not up to us. In fact, we usually sign an agreement that says, if it's wrong, don't come to us. So you can't rely on the freight agent or the supplier necessarily for your customs classification. And with this, it is time to tell you about the view of the customs authorities when it comes to customs classification compliance. So what do the authorities say? Let me read it to you. If you intend to move goods to and from this country, it is essential that they're classified in order to identify what duties and controls apply and to ensure a correct customs declaration is lodged. Whether or not you have an agent who handles customs entries on your behalf, you have the legal responsibility to ensure the correct classification is applied. Incorrect classification can lead to delays in clearing goods, overpayment of duty, and possible penalties. In other words, you must get it right, and you can't rely on others to do it for you. And with that, welcome to your key support tool, the Customs Classification Questionnaire. Ta-da! So what is the purpose of this questionnaire? We've already said it. We're going to say it again. To help you classify the right way, to help you find this commodity code. It's a logical and basically required structure of simple questions that you need to know, that you need to ask, and that you need to document to enable you to find the commodity code and the tariff, follow the tariff, and apply the GIRs, the GRIs, the general rules of interpretation. Different subject, different, another day, step by step, right? This is for later. And of course, if you use it for every time you classify a product and then you save it in a record retention place, then you have a record. And in 2 years, in 6 months, in whenever an audit comes to you, you can prove as to why you have decided this. And this means you didn't just put the finger in the air and you said, that's it. No, you have a reason for doing what you're doing. So that's the purpose of the questionnaire. Let's go through it. If you haven't downloaded it, download it now, or you can just follow on in this recording, and this will also serve you. Right. So what I'm describing next is also on your questionnaire. What is the start? How do you start with this thing? So here's what I do: is I give it a broad home. I give my product a broad home. So I have equipped myself with the product in front of me, if that's feasible. I have equipped myself with marketing material, also technical material. I know what it is. I can describe it. The first thing, fundamentally, if you think of a funnel approach, we're going to ask the question, what is it? At very high level, can you put it here? Give it one of those. What is it? Ceramics? Is it a toy? Is it a machinery? Is it wood? What is it? So please make your choice. Then, once you've made that choice, you are de facto locked in a category, and it also means that it is none of the other. So if it is a toy, it is a toy. Then it's not a game, right? Or it's not sport equipment, or it's not clothing, it's a toy. And that matters. So be careful on the very fundamental decision. What actually is it? because that gets you down a path that you might not be able to recover from. And sometimes this may not be so easy. You have dual use, triple use, many uses for an item. So determining where it fits here might be quite challenging. And the recommendation here is, if it is very obvious what is the use, well, then that is probably what you should be selecting here. If it is unsure, you may have to select both or all three uses and check individually if where it fits legally in line with the rules. That's a more advanced classification way. So having done that, you are now ready to proceed. So we've selected, good. Next one. First question we're going to ask is, what are your goods used for? This is because the logic of the tariff, as per the WCO, attributes a number, the commodity code, based on use. Not in every case, but in some cases. So it is essential that you tell me, what am I using this for? And a chair can be used to sit on, can be used to stand on, but can also be used in a circus for acrobatic performances, for example. So the primary use of this product is for what? And I would write that down right now, because then it will, when you get to the classification part, it will allow you to see if what it's used for, and more crucially, what it's not used for. Because most of the time in the tariff, you're going to disqualify entries, numbers, because the use is not right. So that's why you need to put the use down. So answer me this question: what are your goods used for? And write this down. Do not skip this. Take your time to write it down properly. The next question you want to answer is, how does it work? How does it function? What does it do? It is almost the same as the previous question, except now I want to know precisely what I just said, what it does. A machine is a machine, but for what? What does it do? Is it a wood chopping machine? Is it a laser machine? What? So how does it work or function? What is the purpose of the machine, so to speak? So the functioning or the work, I would write this down, because this can be very crucial for your classification. The next question is already the question regarding the outer surface. That might sound a little strange, but it is important, because if you have a very special package, then that might itself need classifying. But if it's not, just write down if it's a box, if it comes in a cylinder, if it comes in glass, wherever is you present it in. For example, maybe a retail set that just comes in a normal retail packaging, or it could be specially sealed in order to contain the powder that's in it or the chemical substances in it. So you see, it does matter. So write down, how are the goods presented or packaged? And then something that's a little cheeky, but hey, you got to go with what you've got. Sometimes you may have an indication of where it's supposed to go. So for example, you did ask the supplier, hey, what's the harm in this? You could just ask the supplier. You could ask the freight forwarder. You could do your own research, and you think you may have already found it, or you have an idea of what it should be. Well, why not write it down? Write down, I think this code is this based on what this guy told me at this, and he's the exporter, right? So on this day, this guy told me this, and it is from this company. Well, why not? Or you might be partly there. So you will have gotten a 6-digit code, but you haven't got a 10-digit code yet. And you need a 10-digit. So write it down right now. And then this is a clue. This is an idea. It doesn't become the right answer just because one person said it. It's the combination of all of these things together that will get you to the right answer. So do you know of any code that you think fits best your goods? Do you know of any part of the codes if you've been able to classify it partially? With these questions fully answered and spelled out, you now proceed to the tariff. You now proceed to the GIR. You now proceed to everything that require, and then you start to classify, you start to click, and there's a different video that we can do, or that we've done already, by this time that you're watching this, that can explain to you how, once you've done all this, how you then proceed to go through the different tariffs. Now, I need to mention a particular part, and that is certain products, special cases this is not sufficient for. We need more questions answered. So there are some special cases that require more information. So for footwear classifications, if you have footwear, there's more you need to be adding. The type, the example, shoe, boot, slipper, right? The type of shoe. Is it a shoe? Is it a boot? Is it a slipper? The upper material details, the outer sole material details, the heel height, and the purpose. Is it for men? Is it for women? Even is it for children? That is crucial. Otherwise, I can't classify this thing. For food classification, we need the full breakdown of the ingredients, including the percentage weight of each ingredient. That, again, differs from tariff to tariff, but mostly we've seen that percentage weight, especially things like sugar content or milk content, dairy content, fat content is really important. The method of manufacture or the process it has undergone. For example, is it fresh, is it frozen, or is it freeze-dried, or is it ultra processed? So shelf stable or not shelf stable. These kind of things we need to know for food classification. Chemicals are one of the hardest things to classify because you might even need a chemistry degree almost. But overall, you would help a classifier greatly if you supply the chemical abstract service registry number. That's a number that, helps you so much with understanding what this chemical is. And with that number, that CASRN number, you can then correlate, because these numbers have been correlated to HS codes already. So really important and will simplify your life a lot. If the product is a liquid, if it's a powder or solid, that matters. And the full breakdown of the chemical, including the percentage of every ingredient in the chemical. For textile classifications, you can guess it now, we need more detail. We need a detailed description of the items. We need to know the material composition. We need to know how it's construed. For example, knit and woven, the name of the fabric. And one thing that's missing is who's it for. Is it child? Is it man? Is it woman? And there are very specific rules for that. And then finally, for vehicle classification, we need the age of the vehicle, the engine type, and the engine size. And also what matters, we need to know if it's new or used. If it's over 30 years old, we will get that with the age of the vehicle, because that then gets into the antique area. If it's in its original condition, or will it be for everyday use, or has it a specialized use? Now, race car, for example, is different from a day-to-day car. So there you have it. A short, to the point, but hopefully interesting discussion and debate on the first step in customs classification, the essential step, the reason why you need to provide information about the product regarding its use, regarding its form, its function, regarding any classification codes that you may already know, and regarding packaging. So the next steps and the conclusion that we have here is that you need to document that decision. So you've gone through all this trouble, you've answered all of these questions, now you have the document in hand, you've completed it, and now what? Well, now the classification work starts, as I've said, and you are coming then to a classification code based on the information you've provided, and that then is your commodity code. You would then store this into a data retention system that you have in place, and then you can retrieve it whenever you need to know, and whenever you need to remember why you've classified it in a certain way. And that's really important if HMRC comes to audit you. HMRC, what am I saying? HMRC, Irish Customs, German Customs, US Customs, whoever, CBP, come and audit you, then you want to be knowing why you've classified it that way. If you then have classified it based on that questionnaire, you might want to give it to a colleague just to have a 4-eye review and make sure that this sense is sense checked. So fill out the questionnaire, do the classification, you come to a code. That document goes to colleague number 2 if you have the luxury of having one. That colleague then signs off, says, this is exactly what I'm thinking. And then you have a 4-eye review. Now this document's finished, that document goes into your archives, so to speak, and you put the code into the ERP system. Or even better, you put the code into the ERP system and you upload that document to document your decision-making, or at least you copy and paste it into the SAP system. You might want to have an escalation policy as to what happens if you and your colleague disagree, or somebody else, or there's a reason, or your supplier disagrees, your exporters, whoever. What are you going to do then, right? So one way is to insist you are right. Two is to agree in contracts to say whenever there's a discrepancy, we decide. Three is to have a committee, an escalation committee that says, in this case, we will all sit together and agree on the code. Four is you go to HMRC, you go to German Zoll, you go to the US CBP, and you ask for a binding ruling, an advanced classification ruling, and a tariff ruling. That's a possibility in order to resolve this. But you should know what you're doing. And the last one is important. If you can't agree or you are in doubt and is just you can't figure it out by the life of it, of course, you can ask people like me. I will give you my opinion. Of course, I can classify all this, but to be legally sure, you need to apply for what's in the EU known as a BTI, in the UK is an ATR, and then there are rulings of that sort in the US as well as many other jurisdictions. So it's a legally binding decision by the authorities to tell you what's what, to tell you what the code actually is. Well, and there you have it. We talked a lot. Well, I talked a lot, and I hope you listened carefully about the key questions that we need to be asking even before we start opening the tariff, before we start clicking, before we start determining HS codes. Nah. Step by step. So we go back a step and we ask the essential questions of the questionnaire. We open it, we go through it, methodology, tick one, question 2, question 3, question 4. We complete it, and then with that sheet, we go to the tariff. And with that sheet, we start clicking in the tariff and we determine the code. And then, so after you've gone through this document and you have completed it, you have a record of why you decided what you decided, and you can then archive that. And in case of audit, as I've said, you can reproduce it and explain why you've come to this decision. And that is the way you classify for sure, and you build up an argument, a reason as to why you have done what you've done. And what you're not going to do is going to put finger in the air and you say, well, the freight forwarder said so, or the broker said so, or the exporter said so, the importer, whoever, right? You get it. You need to sort this out for yourself and have a methodology. And this is one step away from the HS codes, away from the GIR and the classification tariffs. Start with this first. So what have we done? We've looked at what is HS codes. We've looked at why HS codes matter, commodity codes matter. We looked at what the customs authority said. We went through the questionnaire, and I've told you what you can do once the questionnaires are completed. Now, I hope this has given you a first idea, a first tool, a kit of how you can start successfully on customs classification. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again at another video. Please leave some feedback. Tell me what you thought of this course, this mini course, so to speak, this 30-minute bite size to get you started the right way on customs classification. All the best. Bye.